Well, good evening. The MTRC has suspended all excavation works in Wan Chai North at the site of the future exhibition centre station. The decision was announced just this evening after reports that subsidences recorded on site had exceeded the acceptable limit back in 2015. The exhibition centre station near the Wan Chai Ferry Pier is on the Sha Tin to Central Link. Despite repeated questions on subsidence levels and locations, the MTRC executive gave no further details. He only stressed that safety comes first and the firm needs time to review all records.
The purpose of stopping the excavation-related work at Exhibition Centre is really to address the public concern and also to give us time to really examine all the recorded data and the conditions of the surrounding facilities to ensure that they are safe. We believe we have been following set procedures, and we believe the construction as well as the surrounding facilities are now safe, but we want to be doubly sure.
Meanwhile, To Kwa Wan residents and district councillors want the MTRC to explain reports of subsidence caused by construction for the Sha Tin to Central Link. Sharon Tang has more.
Checking the gas pipes. During his daily inspection, a town gas officer was at Ma Tau Wai Road, making sure there's no leakage in gas pipes and underground pipes. That's after the company noted that gas pipes at 4 locations near the To Kwa Wan station construction site had subsided over acceptable limits a few years ago. Although light leakage was found in one of the pipes, Town Gas says it's already been rectified and it's now stable. The MTRC admitted there were records of subsidence reaching alarm levels, but Town Gas was not notified. No details were given on how far the pipes sank. Recent media reports also raised concerns on some 23 buildings in the neighborhood where subsidence was said to have exceeded acceptable levels. Today, measurements were made on some buildings showing the inclination and subsidence levels. Still, this woman fears that the subsidence of gas pipes could cause leakage or even an explosion. What's more, some buildings along the construction site have stood for more than 50 years. Will they face further subsidence? A veteran engineer said it depends.
If the settlement exceeds the capacity of the existing building, they may crack and cause structural damage. This should be assessed by case.
Meanwhile, chairman of the LegCo subcommittee on matters relating to railways, Michael Tian, says he's already organized a meeting with the authorities to discuss the issue. He added that's because the public has the right to know more. Kowloon City District councillors and some To Kwa Wan residents also protested outside the MTRC headquarters today. They want the rail giant to attend a special meeting next week to reveal further information. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
Hong Kong saw slightly slower growth in the second quarter compared with the first quarter. The government says the economy sustained strong momentum, but amidst the Sino-US trade war is creating uncertainties. Caleb Lung reports.
Hong Kong's economy appears in good shape despite the escalation in the Sino-US trade war. Economic growth for the second quarter was 3.5% compared with the same period last year, slightly lower than the 4.6% recorded in the first quarter. With year-on-year growth at 4% for the first half of the year, the government maintained its GDP growth forecast at 3 to 4% for the whole of 2018. Domestic demand remained strong, with private consumption rising 6.1% year-on-year. Underlying inflation remained unchanged at 2.4%, while the figure for 2018 as a whole is forecast at 2.5%. As for trade, total exports of goods grew solidly by 4.6% year-on-year. Exports of services expanded notably by 6.1%, while inbound tourism continued to register double-digit growth. However, as the Sino-US trade war intensifies, external uncertainties increased in the latter part of June. How the trade conflict will affect global economy and Hong Kong's exports in the coming months remains to be seen.
If the U.S. mainland trade conflict persists or even escalates, and it will probably have some other indirect impact on Hong Kong, and it may affect global economic sentiment and may also affect global trade and investment activities, thereby affecting Hong Kong's overall economic growth.
Earlier in the day, Commerce Chief Edward Yao described the current stage of the trade war as the standby signal number one. Hong Kong's export figures will be affected in the second half of the year, and the government remains cautious about economic growth. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
A high court will decide on Tuesday whether to put a halt on the co-location plan until its judicial reviews are concluded. Disqualified lawmaker Sixtus Leung and Cheung Chau resident Kwok Chuk Kien earlier asked for an interim injunction on the plan. Leung argues the damage would be irreparable if the challenge was successful after the service began. The government says the judicial reviews on the co-location plan are weak and the arrangement was properly legislated.
A Japanese councillor was denied entry into Hong Kong last night. Kenichiro Wada claims to have been turned away by immigration staff without reason and denied access to a translator. He had been to Hong Kong before to attend an election campaign of a pan-Democrat who spoke out against inaccurate reports on the politician's views.
After some of the pro-Beijing newspapers said that he supports Taiwan independence, he has repeated but more than once the suppression of the freedom of speech of Hong Kong. Especially as you know that recently the political environment is very bad, like the Hong Kong National Party.
In the Facebook post, Wada said it would be regrettable if he's been identified as an enemy following inaccurate newspaper reports. The Immigration Department only said it doesn't comment on individual cases. The grandfather of a severely disabled boy who U.S. authorities say was kidnapped by his father and taken to a compound in New Mexico says he's been told a body found at the scene is his grandson. The grandfather and imam at a mosque in New York said he was shocked to hear his son and others had been training children to carry out school shootings.
Our family every day is saying, this is so bizarre, it's weird, it's like, what's going on? So there's something, I don't know. Honestly, I found out that my sons do have arms. All of them are legal. All of them are registered. Having said that, I have no idea. I don't know what his thinking was, because to do something as extreme as this, it doesn't make sense.
Siran Wahaj was among 5 adults arrested on suspicion of child abuse after 11 malnourished children were found at a compound in New Mexico. Authorities there have not yet confirmed that the remains of the boy were Wahaj's son.
Flash floods in southern France have forced 1,600 people to flee their homes. Hundreds of rescuers, backed by helicopters, evacuated most of the flood victims who were camping in 3 different regions. The hardest hit is the Gard region, where tents and caravans were washed away. Authorities are searching for one camper they believe was swept up by the floodwaters. After a hot spell, the flash floods transformed 2 rivers into churning waterways that burst their banks. More than 400 firefighters and police officers are lending a helping hand. Welcome back to TVB News. Worries about bus drivers' reactions could be why KMB ruled out proposals on speed limits and real-time monitoring systems. Kena Chu has more on the panelists reviewing franchised bus services in town.
The review committee's appointed lawyer Peter Duncan focused on KMB's safety proposal from 2014. Citing old emails, Duncan said the bus company's former operations director Owen Eckford did not endorse a speed limit proposal on 30 sharp bends and roundabouts. While a current executive said the idea was subject to a communication plan, which bus drivers said would create pressure, it was not entirely clear if that's why Eckford didn't give his approval before leaving his post in 2015. Even KMB chairman Norman Long said he didn't know. Also in question why KMB ignored a black box provider's advice to adopt a real-time monitoring system able to notify KMB's control center of any speeding activities, sudden acceleration, or sharp brakes. Current Operations Director Lan Kim-wong said it was impractical not only because of pressure on drivers but also the difficulty in monitoring more than 4,000 KMB buses. He said KMB ended up using another system instead, which focused on bus deployment efficiency. The Independent Review Committee on Local Franchised Bus Services also heard of physical and verbal abuse drivers face. Up until July, KMB said,
想打好個檸檬茶底，就要將阿薩姆紅茶、伯爵茶、石蘭紅茶撞埋一齊，就係標師三重茶底檸檬茶，全新手堂3種甜度任你揀。
The number of assault cases rose to 41, up from 35 for the whole of last year. KMB has now hired professional psychologists from a local university to help drivers deal with challenges they encounter at work. Kana Chu, TVB News.
Winter flu season is coming, so starting October, a government-subsidised flu vaccine programme will be expanded to cover those aged above 50. Christy Leung has more.
Good news for those aged 50 to 64. Starting October 10th, this age group will receive government-subsidized jabs. The Centre for Health Protection expects about 1.8 million more people will benefit. The subsidy will also be increased from $190 to $210 per dose. Those aged 65 or older, pregnant women, children aged between 6 months and 12-year-old will continue receiving the subsidy. The centre said the government has already procured 752,000 doses of the seasonal influenza vaccine and urged private doctors to make necessary arrangements. The centre said the seasonal flu jabs will be available next month and reminded the public to get vaccinated before the winter season. Starting mid-October, children at the 184 participating primary schools will get free flu jabs under a special outreach vaccination program.
We hope that we can achieve over 50% of the coverage rate among the schools which participate in the pilot program.
For schools which are not covered in the program, the government has already lined up 90 doctors to provide government-subsidized flu jabs. Christy Leung, TVB News.
Standby signal number 1 remains in force. At 7 p.m., a tropical depression over the northern part of the South China Sea was about 370 kilometers southwest of Hong Kong. According to the present forecast track, the tropical depression will keep its distance from Hong Kong tonight. A chance of issuing the strong wind signal number 3 before midnight tonight is relatively low. Occasional squally showers are expected in the next couple of days.
Overseas again, an airstrike by the Saudi-led coalition fighting Shiite rebels in Yemen hit a bus in a busy market, killing at least 50 people, mostly children. Almost 80 people were injured. The coalition said it was targeting rebels known as Houthis who had fired a missile into Saudi Arabia, killing 1 person. Alan Buckner reports.
The attack took place in a crowded market in Sadr province, a Houthi stronghold. The bus that was hit was ferrying local civilians. This man said the strike happened in the middle of the market. The shops were open with lots of people walking around. He said all the people injured or killed were residents, shop owners, and children. A hospital spokesman said 29 of the people killed were children, all of them under 15 years old. A spokesman for the Saudi-led coalition said the attack in Sadr targeted rebels who fired a missile into Saudi Arabia that was aimed at a heavily populated residential area. The missile was intercepted, but its fragments killed 1 person and injured 11. The spokesman called the attack on Sadr a legitimate military action in accordance with international humanitarian law. He accused the Houthis of using children as cover. The U.S. State Department called for an immediate probe.
We call on the Saudi-led coalition to conduct a thorough and transparent investigation into the incident. We take all credible accounts of civilian casualties very seriously. We call on the parties to take appropriate measures to protect civilians in accordance with international law.
Saudi Arabia backs Yemen's internationally recognized government and has been waging war with the Houthis since March of 2015. The rebels control much of northern Yemen, including the country's capital, Sana'a. Yemen is one of the world's worst humanitarian crises, with more than 22 million people in need of assistance. Alan Bucknia, TVB News.
And that's the news.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.